You're live. You're all good.
Thanks. I'm just going to wait a moment or two. I see the number of attendees still clicking up. Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Board meeting for December 8th, 2020. The first thing on our agenda for this evening is our supervisor's report. As I have in weeks past when we've had public hearings, I will actually hold my supervisor's report over until tomorrow's Town Hall e-newsletter, which will include an update on the COVID numbers and planned response in town, as well as other town business. Jill, do you have any announcements for the town administrator's report?
I can hold them as well. I just wanted to remind everybody, if they hadn't had a chance to go through town, the holiday lights are up and they look spectacular. So thanks to our DPW crews for the snowflakes in both hamlets and the garland and white light wrapped poles in Millwood, and to the BAB for selecting an amazing contractor once again for the lights in town. In the Chappaqua Hamlet, the place looks gorgeous. So all I wanted to say.
Thanks. So we've come to the portion of our agenda that's dedicated to public comment and new business. If anyone would like to make a comment, please feel free to raise your hand. If you are here to make a comment regarding the form-based code, if you can hold for just a moment, we will open the public hearing on that in just a moment. But this portion of the meeting is dedicated to any public comment or new business regarding any other matters that anyone is here to speak on.
Hey, Ivy, could I actually just touch upon the holiday window?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, Zoom around town. So this week, we launched a holiday window walk where about 20 to 21 merchants are participating. They've hidden an elf in their holiday windows, and to coordinate with the town's efforts with the tree lighting, they've also lit up their windows just to make it more festive. We've provided a map in last week's newsletter as well as posted on Facebook. And each day this week, we're highlighting a merchant who participated in our Zoom Around Town Holiday Edition. There are 2 to 3 minute videos showcasing their products, their custom services. They do holiday gift wrapping. They provide delivery, curbside pickup, all that good stuff. And so I highly recommend folks check it out. It will be in the town newsletter tomorrow, as well as posted on Facebook each day. Thanks.
Lauren,
Thanks
you want to mention the 15-minute spots too for the pickup?
Thanks, Lisa. Yes, there are also 15-minute spots, temporary spots in the downtown hamlet. There are 4 of them. One is in front of Chappaqua Village Market on Lower King Street. And one is located on King Street in front of Desires by Michelet. One is on North Greeley across the street from Susan Lawrence. And one is on South Greeley in front of Villarinas. Those spots really are to help folks do their quick errands as well as get their curbside pickup done in a timely manner. So thank you to Jill and Bart and the crew at DPW for just executing that so quickly. I think they really turned out well, especially because we just did it in such a pinch. So thank you so much.
I love the skirts on the bottom. They really make the sign. Thank you, Lou.
Okay, anyone else? Public comment, new business, going once, going twice. Okay. All right, then the next item that's on our agenda for this evening is the first of our 2 public hearings. The first public hearing is regarding the proposed form-based code for the Chappaqua Hamlet and the draft generic environmental impact statement. Can I get a motion from the board to open the public hearing?
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Tonight is our 4th public hearing on the proposed form-based code for the Chappaqua Hamlet and the DGEIS. I just wanted to say a couple of quick things before we launch into the public comments. I continue to get questions regarding what the form-based code is. I just wanted to reiterate for anyone who's new to our public hearing process that the form-based code is a proposed zoning change. This is not a development plan. We get a lot of questions, the town board does, and a lot of emails objecting to the idea of building 1,000 residential units in the Chappaqua Hamlet. So I'll say again, the form-based code is not a plan to develop 1,000 units of housing for the Chappaqua Hamlet. What we are proposing is rezoning. So think legislation, not construction. Currently, the hamlet is entirely zoned for retail or industrial uses. We would like to relax that zoning to allow for mixed use and residential development to occur. We are also creating a set of design guidelines. That's what a form-based code is, a set of design guidelines that will dictate how any future development will look. This gives us control over the form of future development so that the hamlet looks quaint and charming and beautiful. What you see in the illustrations that are included in the DGEIS is a maximum build-out scenario. It's only a scenario. We are required to study that as a part of the DGEIS and part of the environmental impact statement and the seeker process that accompanies the passage of the form-based code. So prior to enacting our zoning change, we're required to look at what that maximum theoretical build-out would look like. Our last zoning change happened in the 1970s. And so we are looking now to enact a code that can sustain our town for decades to come. And the changes that we're discussing here will happen gradually over time. And I can say that confidently because the maximum build-out scenario that we're looking at would require, for example, the sale of the train station parking lot, which is town-owned property and would be subject to permissive referendum. It would also require the construction of municipal parking garages and other such major capital projects that are not currently planned. So the other thing that I get a lot of questions about that I just wanted to mention prior to launching into the public comments is about the process and where we are in the process. Specifically, people ask me whether the town board can grant the Chappaqua Central School District Board of Education's request for additional time. We have done that. People are also asking me not to pass the form-based code this year. And so that's not on the table either. So I just wanted to take a moment once again to remind everybody of where we are in the process. So bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so those who've joined us for previous public hearings have seen this illustration before, but this is where we are in terms of the form-based code review process. We are still here at step one, which is that we are having our public hearing on the DGEIS and the form-based code. I actually stuck 4 important dates underneath here so that people can start to reference them. Right now is our 4th public hearing. Next week, December 15th, and that should say 2020, not 2021. December 15th, next week, we will have our 2nd town board internal work session where we will be discussing our own thoughts and feedback on the form-based code and the DGEIS based on our reading of those documents, as well as the comments that we've been hearing from the public through the written public comment process, as well as through these public hearings. We have confirmed a date with the Board of Education for a joint meeting, and that will be on January 13th of 2021 to discuss the results of their consultants' analyses into the question of the number of school-age children that are projected, as well as the capacity of the schools to accept additional students. And then lastly here, I have the date January 19th, 2021. We have that on the schedule now as our 5th public hearing. And I put in parentheses, final. I have been saying all along, I will give everybody plenty of advance notice before we close the public hearing. We are likely getting to a point, and I think we will be there by January 19th, where we would be ready to close the public hearing. So, consider this some advance notice that we may be looking to close the public hearing at that time if we're at a point, as I suspect we likely are, where we're hearing some repeat comments and not new substantive comments. So that's where we are right now. You can see the rest of the process that has to take place. The written public comment period will stay open for an additional 30 days after the close of the final public hearing. All of that information then will be supplied to our consultants, who will go back and do additional analyses in order to create the final generic environmental impact statement, and any revisions to the form-based code that will result from those analyses. That will be presented to the town board. There may be sort of a process of going back and forth before the town board accepts those revisions. That would then come back to the public, and we would start our second community engagement process to talk everyone through what's in that final generic environmental impact statement. We would be accepting written comments at that time prior to adopting our findings statement, making additional revisions to the form-based code as necessary, then eventually having a public hearing on that revised form-based code, and then finally step 9, considering that for adoption. So that is where we are. And the last thing I wanted to go over, and then we will turn the floor over to everyone else. Once again, those of you who've been here for our 3 previous public hearings have seen these before. But for those of you who haven't, these are some guidelines for tonight's public hearing. When we call on you, if you can please state your name, your address, and your organization, if any. Please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. We will give you a warning at 2:30. Jill, who's operating the warning system tonight?
Christina.
Okay, great. So Christina will give you a gentle warning at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And then at 3 minutes, we will ask you to wrap up, please. Please try, to the extent possible, not to repeat comments made by others, not to repeat comments you yourself have made at previous public hearings. Do not expect a response during the public hearing. This is really important. People are surprised that we are not responding to and reflecting on the comments that people are making during the public hearing. There's a reason for that. First, we could be here all night, but more seriously, the reason is that we're in listening mode while we're here. We're listening. We're taking notes, we're reflecting on what we're hearing, and you will start to hear us reflecting on what we're hearing in the work sessions. So we had our first internal work session on November 24th. We have our next one, as I mentioned, on December 15th. All of the substantive questions that are received either during the public hearing or through the written comment process must be responded to in writing by our consultant team. You can please submit your comments in writing to chappaqua4ward@mynewcastle.org, even if you have the opportunity to speak here this evening, and everybody who raises their hand will have an opportunity to speak. But even if you do speak, we like to get them in writing because then we have the official documentation as well. Please accept all of the sort of commonly accepted rules of courtesy, decorum, dignity, etc. Please try to address your comments to the entire board, not to one individual member or to the general public. Anyone who does not, stick to these rules may be asked to cease speaking and yield the floor. And last but not least, we will not be using the chat function. Everyone on the town board is listening and thinking about the comments that we're hearing. We will not be accepting substantive comments in the chat function. So please do not put your substantive comments on the form-based code in the DGEIS into chat. If you are having technical challenges, feel free to use chat. And the NCCMC, who's helping to facilitate this meeting, we will try to address your technical issues that way, but we will not be able to talk about the substance through the chat function. So that is everything that I have to say at the beginning. I'll look at my fellow town board members and see if anybody has anything they want to add. Okay, Jill and Sabrina, anything from the two of you before we get started? Okay, everyone, so you know the deal. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your digital hand, and Pam Thornton from NCCMC will help bring you into the conversation.
Okay, we have some hands raised. Scott, Natalia Levine. Please unmute yourself.
Excellent, excellent. Great, thank you. Scott Levine, 149 King Street. Can you hear me?
We can. Hi, Scott.
Excellent. So first off, agree 100% with Jill and with Lauren. The holiday lights, the garland, the snowflakes around town, they do look great. So thank you to the DPW. In the brief time I've got, I want to bring to everyone's attention that there's residents in some of the most affordable rental housing in our community, neighbors of mine, living in apartments in the hamlet who have never been made aware of the form-based code and the profound harm it will bring to them. They live in our community's truly affordable housing, which will be demolished, and they will be cleared out, unlikely to ever find another place to live in our community. Some of you may think this housing is unattractive or an eyesore, but to my neighbors, it is their home. And like me, they are very proud of their little corner of our community. The form-based code incentivizes this displacement of our community's most vulnerable residents, with the consequence that the mainly white, male, wealthy developers who have had an exclusive seat at the table since day one in planning this rezoning will get wealthier as they gentrify Chappaqua. This is not social justice. Allow me to read a public comment submitted by a neighbor this afternoon, which the town will post online tomorrow. My name is Will. I live in the Opportunity Shop building on Greeley Avenue. My neighbor just told me that you're planning to redevelop our neighborhood with newer buildings, and this might mean that I would need to move. This is the first I am hearing about it, and I am concerned. What is going on, and how can I learn more? Okay, so these are my neighbors, our neighbors. They will be gone forever to make way for the primarily luxury housing that would be built in their place. So please, as you consider the housing diversity and social diversity aspects of your plans for Chappaqua, do not focus exclusively on the abstract. These are real people, our community members, whose lives you would be upending, and you have never even properly advised them of your plans, let alone given them the opportunity to get involved, have their voices be heard, and to work collaboratively to shape Chappaqua future. Thank you all for your efforts on behalf of our community.
Thank you, Scott. Pam, if we can bring Ben Herman into the conversation, please.
Yes, Mr. Herman, please unmute yourself.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
We can.
Hi, my name is Ben Herman. I live at 10 North Place. Thank you for your continued work and willingness to hear input from residents. As a reminder, for those who may not know me, I have 18 years of commercial real estate experience. I'm also trying to help the town come to the best outcomes possible here. In terms of building size, 3 stories is economically feasible, and the board should no longer be considering 4 or 5 stories anywhere in the hamlet. The consultants stated that 3 stories is not economically feasible, but they used a cap rate that appears to be based on owner opinions of value rather than actual sales. I've sent in actual sales data to the town, which proves that the owner estimated cap rate used by the consultants is not appropriate. The consultants used a 6% cap rate, whereas I've provided data to the town averaging an approximate 5% cap rate. In more simplified math, the consultants value a property at 16.5 times net operating income versus the prevailing market rate closer to 20 times. Adjusting this assumption generates the profit hurdle they deem necessary. In addition, 91 Bedford is only 3 stories and obviously would not have been built if it wasn't economically feasible. The consultants do not agree with my conclusion that 3 stories is profitable and is feasible. I would kindly request that the town board commission a new feasibility report, given how important building size is to residents and the value that was seemingly given to this conclusion in determining the number of stories allowed. In terms of process, in the event the board moves forward with zoning changes in spite of the community consensus against this proposal, I would ask that the board strongly consider only implementing zoning changes in a limited area, such as along the North Greeley corridor, in order to test the benefits and adverse impacts. In order to achieve some of its goals, the town board can utilize incentive-based zoning to create more than 10% affordable units in a project in that area. A mixed-use project on the Rite Aid site and site to the north with a higher than 10% affordable housing percentage would help the town achieve one of its stated goals, diversity of housing, much faster than limited affordable housing creation as larger projects are built. A model for this type of project is Essex Crossing in New York City, where more than half the units are low or middle income, and there are community benefits, including a new senior center. A rollback of code changes was discussed at the last work session if development becomes too rapid. A developer obviously cannot roll back a project once construction is started, and frankly, a Pandora's box of potential litigation from developers against the town could be opened as soon as applications are filed if a rollback is then implemented. Therefore, if any zoning changes are implemented by the board, this is another reason you should focus only on a very limited area. Thank you for your time and consideration of my feedback. I am available to the extent you guys want me more involved. I appreciate I only have 3 minutes here, but given my professional background, I
Ben,
really
thank
do
you for your
want what's
comments.
best. Sure. Okay.
Pam, if we can bring Ed Frank into the conversation, please.
Yes, Mr. Frank, please unmute yourself. Mr. Frank, can you unmute yourself?
Wait, got it. Oh, good evening. Ed Frank, Newstat Lane, Chappaqua. According to the DGEIS, the form-based code zoning in the Chappaqua Hamlet Business District is essential to stimulate the socio-economic vitality of the community. However, as we know, brick and mortar establishments, as well as struggling shopping malls, have declined in popularity with the emergence and growth of e-commerce companies. Even Microsoft is closing all of its 83 Microsoft retail locations, including its location in the Westchester Mall, where there are considerably more feet on the street than in the Chappaqua Hamlet. As a result, it is evident that constructing 4- and 5-story apartments to put more feet on the street does not translate to improved real retail sales to stimulate the socio-economic vitality of the Chappaqua Hamlet. I would like to see the form-based consultants take a different and more creative and imaginative approach, including, but not limited to, how to compensate for the lack of a supermarket in the downtown Chappaqua Hamlet in order to put more feet on the street, which would help to stimulate the socio-economic vitality of the community, creating more business for the stores in downtown Chappaqua. There are successful establishments in Chappaqua that have been in business for many years, and their business models serve as an example of what is needed to run a successful business in Chappaqua. Perhaps the form-based consultants should be focusing on methodologies to help businesses that may not be as successful in order to improve their business models. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. The next person with their hand raised is David Jeshova.
You can please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yes, hi, thank you. David Jeshova, Ludlow Drive, Chappaqua. In the last conversation, there was reference to other towns that have done form-based code, one of them being Hampton Bays Hamlet in Southampton. And I was looking at their process and comparing it to what we've done, thinking about best practices. And one of the things that they did shortly after launching RFPs for the form-based code and before finalizing the GIS requirements, they did an online preference study for all residents, which got over 1,000 participants, individual and unique respondents who participated in the online survey. And I think a lot of the complaints you hear are frankly just people disagreeing what the plan should be. It doesn't have to be obviously something you hold to, but I think having a survey where people can provide their thoughts on what the town should look like and that just being publicly available would go a long way, frankly, to hearing people's input. So if we just, again, look to best practices in other towns that have done form-based code, perhaps that's something to consider. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. The next person with their hand raised is Madhu Hugga. Please correct my pronunciation. I apologize.
You can unmute
Pronunciation is
yourself.
fine, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I just want to make 2 comments on the proposal. One is concerning the DGEIS. I think there's widespread opinion that the data in the DGEIS contains assumptions that are not realistic, particularly around the estimates on the number of children that may enter the district. So my request to the board is to reissue that with more realistic data and then allow people to digest that more realistic data and then form their opinions on the code based on that. Second comment I'd like to make is a request to the board is literally everyone in town right now is preoccupied with more important concerns. We're in the middle of a pandemic and we have more important concerns to think about than the form-based code. These effects are likely to last well into 2021 as everyone tries to get back to normal. And I'd like to request that this whole issue be postponed till well into 2021, maybe 2022, while we deal with these more important concerns. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to mention, in case you were not on the call at the beginning, we have received feedback from the Board of Education as well as from many residents questioning the projected potential number of school-age children that would result from the maximum build-out scenario. And the CCSD Board of Education has brought on their own consultants to conduct further analysis and to come up with revised projections. We anticipate seeing the results of their analysis at the joint meeting that I mentioned that'll take place on January 13th. So there is a plan in place to look further at that particular question as a result of the feedback that we've gotten from people on that. So I did just want to reassure you of that. Sorry for the interruption. Pam, the next person with their hand raised, please. I believe Robin Klein.
Yes, please unmute yourself.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks, Robin. If you can just state your name and address for the record, please.
Robin Klein, Tanglewild Place. I'm very pleased that you're all spending this time to hear the feedback in the town. I moved here 26 years ago when my children were not even born. So I've been on both ends of empty nesting because I didn't have children that attended school. And then where I am now, an empty nester because my children have aged out of the school. And I always thought I'd be one of those who, the moment they left, I too would leave. But I really come to love this town. I came here many years ago because of the wonderful schools, and the town was very charming and it was a nice reprieve from the city. And I've stayed here because it's like being in New Hampshire or Vermont without having to drive 4 hours, because it really is a charming town and I've made a life here and I'm very comfortable here, and I'm comfortable paying the taxes even though my kids don't go to the school, because I feel very strongly about the town and the community. And I really do think it's very imperative that we factor in the public opinion. And again, I appreciate that you're holding all these sessions to do so. And I hope that as a result that we're able to craft a plan that reflects the value proposition of the town, why the residents are in the town and why the residents come to the town and why the residents remain. And I think we need to have a process where the community is engaged and the residents that are here today can offer up some post-pandemic views on what they want the town to be. I think the 2014 initiative and the survey was very well intentioned back then in order to revitalize and make the town more vibrant, but I think it's no longer relevant. I think everyone's touched on, the post-pandemic world What will it be? What will retail stores be like? What will commuting be? How will work paradigms have shifted? How seismic will the shift be? What will dining be like? I think there's just so many questions we no longer can answer based on the 2014 survey. I think it's worthy of coming back and updating. I'm very pleased to see that the school is engaged and that they're working on a plan. I think they really are the crown jewel of our town, and their considerations are very important because not only does it impact the community and the school, but it's also a question of how do we continue to tax and afford to maintain the school and the quality of the school that we're so well known for. I think it's very important that residents be heard today. It concerns me when I hear all these outside real estate developers who are not part of the town. It concerns me that they will see this as a financial windfall. And I think that needs to be examined when we cede control and approval over what will be built.
Robin, you've reached 3 minutes. If you can wrap up.
The model, school-age children. Sure. Parking, fire department, traffic. I think the size and the scope needs to be reconsidered based on our town relative to any other town, and not recreate urban development. I think there's some good data in Reader's Digest that we need to look at to see what happens if we build it, who will come, and what that impact will be. And
Robin, thank you very much for all of your comments. You've exceeded 3 minutes. If you have one final sentence.
Just that the financial models need to be reconsidered and update for all the factors that I've mentioned. And I would look forward to seeing that in a revised proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person with their hand raised is Warren Gottlieb.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I just have one brief comment tonight. This has come up a few times. I know it came up at the November 24th work session that you had around the Thanksgiving holiday. The question's been raised during the discussion, and it was raised that night, whether the town board could roll back the form-based code passage. And during that discussion, our town council, I believe, indicated that it's relatively easy to roll this back past passage, that you can change the zoning back, you can upzone, you can remove some of the zoning density, and so forth. If that is in fact our town council's opinion, what I think, given the importance of this issue, I would ask that the town board immediately ask town council to provide a formal, unequivocal opinion letter to this effect on Keenan Bean letterhead without delay, and that the opinion letter be publicly posted online by the town. Thank you very much for all your efforts.
Thank you for your comment. The next person with their hand raised is Daniel Soloway.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can. Hi, Dan. If you could just state your name and address, please.
I'm Dan Soloway. I live on Crossways. I really like progress, and I'm really happy that the Hamlet is considering a change to the code. And I've reached out to you and Jeremy this year, and even very recently this week, about wanting to open up a business in town. So it's exciting to see that we'd like to have positive change. So I'm not going to get into specifics or talk about the consultants or any studies, more just to say that what I see is the max build out is everybody's concern. And before I got into the restaurant industry and in food, which I've done for 20 years, I was an options market maker. And I feel like we'd be in a good spot to consider options, or maybe phasing in part of this plan, just based on the feedback I'm hearing and everybody's concern from the school district to the residents. It's not to say that we shouldn't go forward and shouldn't do things that are going to benefit the town, benefit the community. It's just kind of the sense I'm getting, almost like third party. Obviously, I feel this way a little bit myself, but I think that change is not always good. Good change is good. So I'm really excited that we're like moving forward in a great direction, because it's been a slow, quasi-static process since I moved to town. I just would be wary of the outcome if everybody is worried about max build out and the school district and a bunch of other things. That's really it. But hopefully there'll be a resolution that you all see fit, and it will work to be mutually beneficial for all the stakeholders. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dan. The next person with their hand raised is Raymond Sanseverino.
Then please unmute yourself.
Okay. You able to hear me?
We
Can you hear
can.
me?
Hi, just state your name and address, please.
Yeah, Ray Sanseverino, 65, Carolyn Place, Chappaqua, New York. At the town board work session on November 24th, you each made reference to listening to what the residents of the town want. You also said you were mindful of the school board's concerns. I hope we can take the town board at its word, but several things that have occurred leading up to the form-based code give me little comfort. The entire form-based code has come across to many of us as an ambush. Scott Levine mentioned earlier today about his neighbor who knew nothing about it. Since I became aware of it only late October of this year, I've talked to many residents, and not one person I spoke to knew anything about it, and they all asked the same question: why and why now in the middle of a pandemic? The best form-based codes, as the board knows, I'm sure, are developed only after a great amount of community input, including charrettes. And this form-based code has engaged in little of that. Indeed, the process by which we got to this point is somewhat disturbing. As I understand it, the downtown working group consisted of, town board, planning board members, and 2 developers and an architect who works for one of the developers. Of course, they came up with a code that opens the town to overbuilding. I felt it's bad enough that ordinary members of the community were not invited to the group, but to leave the school board out of the process, which, and I refer to it as someone just did as well, as the crown jewel of our community, and the primary reason people move here, is unthinkable and curious at best. And I feel the board has been left to scramble to protect the school system at a time when the board and the superintendent in particular are obviously working very hard to protect our children during the pandemic. If you have a child in school, you'll know that we get emails every day about what's going on in all the cases of COVID and how they're doing their best to keep school open. And now the superintendent has to deal with this issue as well, which I think just takes away from the primary obligation she has, which is to educate our kids, hopefully in the classroom. I feel the process has gotten political when this should strictly be about our community and not politics. I'm a registered Democrat, and I'm ashamed to say that a prominent Democrat in our community was admonished by a district leader for publicly opposing the form-based code, which says to me, if the Democratic leadership of the town wants this, you have to support the machine, which is really unfortunate, not appropriate. In terms of taxes, at the meeting on the 24th, Jeremy quoted median tax bills for fee simple properties, those for condos and rentals, and by his numbers, which we all know, fee simple pay a lot more, 3 to 4 times more than condos in town. I think there was one exception where it was more than 2 times. And he concluded that only 8% of the payers pay their fair share of the $34,000 per pupil that the school district spends. I'm not sure what he was getting at, but I think it misses the point, which is that whether you're part of the 8% or the 92%, and by the way, my school taxes exceed $52,000, so I'm 153% of my so-called fair share. Taxes on residential properties will have to increase. It's pure math and nothing more. You cannot get to the $34,000 per student by only collecting $5,000 or so from condos or residential.
Ray, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you've gone over 3 minutes. If you can wrap up, please.
I will. My other concern is there's talk of granting incentives to developers using pilots, and the school board has no say in this. And to me, the school board absolutely must have a role and a seat at this table before this code can work in a fair manner to all residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to correct the record for just a moment. There's no discussion of granting pilots to developers at the current time. The next person with their hand raised is Jonathan Jaffe.
Hi, great, thank you. I'm Rabbi Jonathan Jaffe. I live in town at Bristol Place. And I'm speaking both with myself and as a co-chair of the Chappaqua Interfaith Council. Along with my co-chair, Reverend Martha Jacobs, First Congregational Church, we're going to be putting a letter out tomorrow in which we are hoping that this discussion that we're entering into right now can be a sacred opportunity for our community to really talk about the socioeconomic diversity or lack thereof in our town, and perhaps that proposals such as the form-based code and counter proposals as we continue this discussion might steer us towards even a bit more of that diversity in our town, which we think would be to all of our advantage. I'll also say as a Chappaqua parent that it was an incongruity to me this week to receive two messages from the school. On one hand, I received a message that this is Inclusivity Week, and I received another message saying that we have to worry about the form-based code because it might actually lower the taxable base and dilute the quality of education in our town. Those two messages to me simply don't go hand in hand. And I think it behooves us to take a step back and to think about, in whatever plan forward, how we might be able to make our town even just a bit more inclusive. Many of us have spent the past year demonstrating outside, calling for an end to inequality and to taking our part. And it seems to me that this discussion offers just a time for us to do that. We live in one of the most segregated areas in the country, and one in which people would like to live close to high-paying jobs and good schools, and that this is an opportunity for us to be able to perhaps move in that direction even slightly. Finally, I just say as a rabbi, as a clergy person, that our synagogue suffers from a legacy gap. We do not have people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s in the numbers at a house of worship that one would expect because of the environment in which we live, which leads to a population bell curve. And because of that, we do not have the wisdom of elders to pass on the traditions, the generations to our younger children. And it would be amazing if we in this town could perhaps think about how we could allow a greater percentage of our congregants to remain living here after their children matriculate out of the schools, and perhaps that more of the people who actually work in the town and help to serve in schools and in civil occupations to be able to live among us. So I'm just hoping that whatever steps we take forward, that we might think about how we can make our town just a bit more inclusive, as that is the theme of the week within our schools. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, Rabbi. The next person with their hand raised is Stephen Kemler.
Hi, this is Steve Kemler. I live on Aspen Road, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts today. I'm a graduate quite a few years ago of Grafflin, Bell, and Greeley, and I recently moved back to town and will, in the not distant future, have kids, going through the school system as they get a little older. And first of all, I really wasn't aware of the form-based code till, say, a month ago. I saw a sign on the side of the road, and I was really surprised when I dug in. I asked a friend, did he know about this form-based code? He said, oh, I thought that had something to do with people didn't like the programming language they were going to be teaching at the high school. I said, okay, that's a bit of a concern. And now one of the things I do is I happen to be a developer, so I do know some reasonable amount about this, although mostly I do it Florida, other parts of the country, and I have no interest in building here. But I look at some of the towns around here. I mean, I love Chappaqua. I really like Katona. I like Armonk. I like Pleasantville. I think these are the towns that kind of fit in with Chappaqua. I don't go to White Plains that much. To be honest, I lived in the city for many years, and I'm really not looking for high-rise buildings in my town. I think a lot of people I've spoken to share that thought. And if you guys said, wow, we've got this great plan, we're going to revitalize downtown as 3 stories, go, go, go. But 5 stories, holy cow, I just don't see how that fits in from all the work I've done around the country, from the towns, which I know very well around here. honestly, I was shocked. 5 stories in downtown Chappaqua. I just don't see it. And everyone I've spoken to pretty much feels the same. I spoke to one of the shopkeepers in town, and some of these people I know from, a couple decades ago when I lived here. One of them was particularly concerned he's going to be displaced. If you build a building like that, it takes a couple of years. Your business is probably out of business. And you might be able to move back in if you can wait 2 years, but how many shopkeepers can close down their business and move back in 2 years later? So if you have these shopkeepers, who many of you have known for a long time, most of their businesses are going to go under if they redevelop their location. That's just how it works. Some of them might be able to relocate, but mostly they won't. Mostly they won't. And it takes too long to build something like that for them to come back in. The other one is I walk in downtown Chappaqua, and I like downtown Chappaqua. I'd like to see it a little bit revitalized, but there's already a good bit of traffic. And, when my kids are going to Bell School and then they walk through town afterwards, I used to do that and get an ice cream cone and a slice of pizza. You're going to have a lot of cars going by. You really are. I think personally, you're going to have many more kids because these are going to be people moving up from the city with young kids. So I think 100 people, personally, I think it's 500 if you actually built 1,000. Anyway, thank you so much for giving the opportunity to share. Those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kemler, and I'm glad you decided to move back to town. The next person we're going to hear from is Dana Gorlick.
Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand. That was inadvertent.
No worries. Thanks anyway. So that actually is all of the folks that we've had raise their hand. Oh, we've got one more. Okay. So the last person we'll hear from is Marge Tullar.
It's Tour, but thank you.
Sorry. Thank you for correcting me.
I am from Tour and Barone in Albany, New York. We've been retained by a group of residents, the Residents United to Save the Chappaqua Hamlet, RUSH, and they've asked us to provide input and comment on both the DGEIS and the form-based code. To start out, there's not opposition to the form-based code conceptually. It's a really important process, but historically these codes are used in more urban areas. And part of the reason that they're less popular in suburban areas is because there's less of a focus on individual properties. We will submit written comments, but I did want to comment mostly this evening on the idea of community character. And the reason I'm focusing on that is it's a requirement under SEQR, the State Environmental Quality Review Act. It's also something that the form-based codes focus on, and it's very specifically defined. Community character is set forth in the SEQR workbook, and it talks about all the man-made and natural features of an area. It includes visual character of a town, its visual landscape, but it also includes the buildings and structures and their uses, the natural environment, activities, town services, and local policies that are in place. These combine to create a sense of place or character that defines the area. So community character is sometimes used as a dog whistle for nefarious purposes, but it's a very real criteria that comes into play when you're analyzing something like the form-based code. All of your comments this evening to me speak to what you have, which is a wonderful community character. And the current iteration of the form-based code is somewhat overbroad. I know you introduced us, Madam Supervisor, to the concept that this is a zoning change and it's a long-term goal, but this is a densification that will change the character in a very dramatic way. And a form-based code, and specifically the draft GEIS, is required to look at your comprehensive plan. And your comprehensive plan identifies the desire for a variety of businesses and a diversity of housing. It also speaks to a walkable community. The fact that you currently have 1 and 2 stories, not 4 and 5 stories, those are dramatic changes that need to be examined very carefully before they're incorporated into the form-based code. The community plan, also your comprehensive plan, also speaks to keeping the scale and character of your community, that you want low density housing and community neighborhoods. And the desire to have affordable housing, doesn't require large buildup. You can use 2- and 3-story structures to allow for development of your businesses as well as development of affordable housing. You can use low-scale affordable housing to be incorporated as a part of your community. It's a recognition of the need for diversity, but you don't ignore the impacts on your small town character. I would ask that in light of
Ms.
COVID,
Tullar, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You've reached the 3 minutes. If you can wrap up, please.
I will indeed, and I appreciate the time that all of you are taking. I would just ask that in light of COVID and the comments from your community and the very real requirements of seeker, that you very carefully look at the requirements of your form-based code and whether, as it exists now, this is right for your community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your opinions. The next person with their hand raised is Suzanne Chazen.
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay. Hi, everyone. I know normally I weigh in with sort of more stuff about the DGEIS and things, but tonight I really just wanted to speak from the heart and say that one of the reasons that I would like to speak to you right now is I am one of those soon-to-be empty nesters. My oldest child is out of the school system. My younger one is soon graduating. And I had hoped to stay in Chappaqua for many, many years. We're very happy here. My husband's in his 70s. I'm going to soon be in my 60s. And we have a very modest home. We moved in 1998. We bought the house on an estate sale. We didn't think we could get it. We got a very substantial discount because the people were anxious to sell. So we haven't done a lot to our home. This is, I know Norma Drummond a few weeks ago mentioned that there are people living in Chappaqua today who could not afford to buy in Chappaqua today. And to some degree, that speaks to my family. We moved in, we love this town. And one of the things that worries me is I am very happy to see a revitalization in the hamlet with small stores. I am perfectly fine with bringing in a more diversity of economic base and all those things. As far as the school goes, I am all in favor of whatever the school board thinks is the right thing to do. But I do worry about people like myself who are going to be people who, if there is a substantial increase in taxes, we may not be able to be here anymore. And instead of the town being more diverse in terms of income ranges, in terms of age ranges, it may become less because we can't afford $4,000 a month rentals in town. So that's something that for us is a concern. So I just wanted to bring that up to the board and speak from the heart that I remember one of the things I loved in this town was after Hurricane Sandy, how people came together, how total strangers offered us their homes because our power was out. And I really came to this whole process with the belief that that's the town I know. And I wish that we could reset the clock and go back there where everybody could take the beginning stage and say, let's go back there. Let's start again as a town. I guess what I feel is the menu was set. And it's almost like we, somewhere along the line, someone decided that the meal plan was going to be this, and we could pick a few condiments we don't like, or maybe change the spicing in something, but we can't reset the entire menu. And I guess that's not the Chappaqua I've lived in all these years, and it's not the Chappaqua that I was hoping to see. So I really, really do hope that we could find a way to go back to the beginning, to build consensus and to have the community as a whole come together and really try to come up with what we want, because I'm in favor of all the things, thank you, I'm in favor of all the things we're talking about, but I just don't think we've arrived at it as a community. I'm all done. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more person with their hand up. We'll take Charles Gibb, please.
Hi, good evening. Charles Gibb, live in Quaker Lane in Chappaqua. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm British, but I've been living here for a long time. Moved here 3 years ago. And I moved here because of the school. I moved here because of the community, and I moved here because of the charming nature of the town and the hamlet, and obviously the commutability into the city. And I think, like many residents, felt a bit ambushed a month ago when I learned about this form-based code, which I must admit I thought was something that the kids were doing at school. But then I found that I was the same as the school because they were kind of unaware of this either, and we're only just starting to get consulted. I do agree with the gentleman who spoke earlier, who said that the school's got much more important things to be worrying about at the moment than reworking and looking at the form-based code. They've got to be taking care of our kids. They've got to be taking care of the community, and they've got to be ensuring our kids get the best education possible. So I think the timing is pretty bad as far as I'm concerned there. What really concerns me about this is three things. One is this whole concept of retail. Retail is dying on Fifth Avenue. So I'm not sure how putting a whole lot of retail into Chappaqua is going to stimulate retail in Chappaqua, because retail is dying in the city, left, right, and center. And my fear is that we won't end up with retail, but we'll end up with a series of fast food joints, which is the only thing that that kind of housing is going to actually rely upon, is lots and lots of fast food joints to do home delivery. Secondly, I'm worried about a loss of control. The form-based code, the way I've read it, says that we lose control. We lose control of the city, or the town. We lose control of the look and feel, and we lose control of the charm of the community that we came to. And finally, the thing that I'm really concerned about is the infrastructure. This is a plan that's got developers and housing written all over it, but it doesn't have infrastructure anywhere included within it. And that's the bit that worries me, because this town, on a normal week, once life returns to normal post-pandemic, this is a busy little town, particularly during sort of commuter hours, and the infrastructure needs to be considered within all of this. And finally, I will say that, to be looking at this in the middle of a pandemic, and I actually just calculated that between now and the next hearing, as it were, there's only actually, 5 or 10 days when we're not hopefully opening Christmas presents and celebrating the new year in whatever way that we can. So I think the idea of sort of jamming this through now and in early January feels a little bit too rushed to me. And this shouldn't be being looked at for at least another 12 to 18 months, in my opinion. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and I appreciate all that you do for the town.
Okay, so that concludes our public comments. Did any of the town board members have anything that they wanted to add here?
I did very briefly. First of all, I appreciate everyone for coming this evening, and I know it's a lot of information, and there have been many who are getting involved now, and many have been involved before, and whether we agree or not, everything that's said is helpful. I did want to point out a couple of things that I heard, and I just wanted to correct them to some extent. We've heard about the 1,000 units, irrespective of what currently could build out or what could be built out. The town board is examining what we can do to limit the size of buildings and what we should do in terms of limiting the scope of where the footprint of the form-based code is. This is one thing that's very important to us. So I don't want anyone to because we're hearing this repeatedly, and I think it's a very fair point, but the town should know that this is one thing that's very critical to us as well. We heard from council, from one of the groups or for Save Chappaqua, about the form-based code was predominantly for urban locations. And I think thankfully from what Lauren Levin has done, we know that Ithaca, Saratoga Springs, Malta, a municipality in the Hamptons, and maybe Beacon is a little bit of an urban area. These are not huge, enormous municipalities or cities by any stretch of the imagination. So the form-based code may fit in urban areas, but it may also fit elsewhere. And in terms of people being left out, whether it's a school board or the public, even if you weren't an interested party, I understand that some people were not aware, and we could always do a better job sharing information and making it more clear. But even during the election, people were coming who were running for office, general people from the public were coming throughout the year. So there's nothing prevented, whether it was a school board or anyone from coming. It's not anyone's fault. It's not saying that no one's interested, but we're still open to listening. We want to listen, and that's why we're keeping this open. But this is not something that is being jammed through. A couple other things I just wanted to point out. There was, again, reference to the Democratic Committee. I can assure you, they are not telling me what to do or anyone on this board what to do. And I would just remind everyone that while Democratic or Democrats, this started under Rob Greenstein, who was appointed as the Republican candidate under Warren Gottlieb in the Republican committee. So this is not a Republican Democratic issue whatsoever. This is just a town issue. Last but not least, the tax issue that a gentleman raised. I'll deal with that later on at a later date, but that 8% I was referencing was the $34,500, not in totality of taxes, but solely as to school taxes per student. If you averaged it out, that's where that number was coming from. But I can explain later how I broke it all out. But thank you everyone for sharing their thoughts. We are listening. We want to listen, make the appropriate changes. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. So do we need a motion? Jill, what are we getting from the board here? Help me out, give me the words.
Motion to adjourn for January 9th.
Should we just adjourn it to the 19th, Nick, and then we'll just do a public notice for the joint meeting with the school board that we're having on the 13th?
I would
right?
think so, yes.
Okay, so to January 19th, 2021. Wow. Motion to adjourn.
Can we get a so moved?
So moved.
We need a second.
I don't know, did I so move or second? Lisa, so moved, did I second?
All right, I can
Okay,
switch
all
it.
in favor? There's my line. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So that concludes for this evening, our first of two public hearings regarding the form-based code and the DGEIS. The next thing on our agenda is our public hearing regarding our local law to extend for 6 months the moratorium imposed by local law 13 of 2018 of the town of Newcastle. Can I get a motion from the board to open up the public hearing, please?
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nick, can we get a?
Yes. So the town board is holding the public hearing on extending the moratorium for an additional 6 months. The moratorium was first adopted by local law 13 of 2018 in December of 2018. And there's been the initial 6 months and then 3 extensions. This would be the 4th extension. I'm going to go into the local law in a moment, but the local law was referred to the Westchester County Board, Planning Board, and the Town Planning Board, and they issued comment letters. The Town Planning Board reviewed it at their December 3rd meeting and responded back with a memo that reads in relevant part, the Planning Board understands the continued need for the extension of the moratorium and notes the considerable progress made during the past 6 months despite the COVID-19 pause. The Planning Board unanimously supports the extension of the moratorium. Additionally, the County Planning Department recognized that they had previously issued review comments as well as comments on the form-based code and comprehensive plan, and noted that while we understand that it can take a substantial period of time for any municipality to create and enact new form-based zoning, we point out that moratorium should not extend beyond a reasonable time frame. Since the proposed extension will take this moratorium beyond 2 years in length, we urge the town to complete its work and bring the moratorium to a close within the extended time frame, meaning the additional 6 months that's being considered. That would extend the moratorium until June of 2021. The moratorium itself, for local law, goes into details both about legislative intent and purpose and talks about what activities have occurred since June of 2020 when the last moratorium extension was adopted, and sets forth a number of public hearings that are being held, the issuance of the DGEIS and revisions to the form-based code, etc. And so this would be a moratorium for 6 months that would prohibit the issuance of various permits within the defined study area, the downtown Hamlet area. There are some exceptions, one of which is that it does not apply to projects that will be undertaken in existing commercial or retail structures having a gross floor area of less than 3,000 square feet. There's also a hardship criteria and exemption that could be applied for in Section 3, Subdivision 4. And also for those applicants who are interested, they can certainly also submit applications that could be reviewed, but they're not able to be voted upon due to the moratorium. So it's a moratorium, but there are some exceptions and ways in which projects could proceed in those circumstances.
Okay, thank you for that. And, I just want to say before we take comments from the public, just with regard to the feedback letter that we got from the county, while I appreciate their urging us to make haste, I would just note that we have been steadily working on the passage of the form-based code for quite some time. And I also don't want anyone to get the impression that the tail is going to wag the dog here. So, the form-based code is going to take as long as it takes for the town to come up with what is a, reasonable and reasoned and, beloved zoning ordinance, at least by some of us. And we're not there yet. And we know that. And we know that there's additional analyses. And we know that we have gathered a substantial number of public comments and written comments, and that, you know, significant work needs to happen as a part of the final environmental impact statement. And so, you know, I would not want anyone to get the impression that we are, you know, barreling forward at the behest of the county. You know, I won't let the tail wag the dog here. So that said, I don't know if anybody on the town board has anything they want to add before we take public comment. Okay. All right. If anyone from the public has any comments with regard to the extension of the moratorium, please feel free to raise your hand. So Pam, if we can bring Suzanne Chazen into the conversation, please.
Suzanne, unmute yourself, please.
Hi, you're hearing a lot from me tonight. Sorry, guys. I would like to say that one of my problems with continuing the moratorium, which I think when you started, it was supposed to be a very temporary situation, 6 months, maybe extended once for a year. I think that it puts undue pressure on the passage of the form-based code. And as the town board itself has admitted, we are a long ways from having a sense that we have a beloved a piece of legislation that the town can get behind. And I think as long as we have a moratorium, we are putting a great deal of pressure on everyone for passage. And I think if we simply lift the moratorium, we give business owners a chance to develop as they wish to develop under the current regulations. And I think we give the town a breather and an opportunity to step back and decide what they want to, you know, what we want to do as a town. And so, I mean, I feel that if you get another 6 months, as the attorney said, you're really pushing the bar. You can't go any further. So that puts a time frame and feels like the clock is ticking and we don't have a lot of choices. So to me, it seems that continuing with the moratorium is not a good idea.
I mean, if I can just add a point of clarification that there is nothing in the law that prevents this moratorium from being continued beyond the 6-month extensions. Typically, you do it via 6 months extensions, and the law recognizes that as long as you're making progress and there's a reasonable basis for continuing the moratorium, that you can do so. And it was not envisioned that this would be a 6-month moratorium when it was first adopted. It was envisioned there would be 6-month extensions.
Can I just say that I feel that what's happening is the town is artificially being drained of its energy and juice by doing this. I realize you're only talking about square footage over 3,000 square feet existing, but it's also anything that's going to be built. And it drains, it creates its own problems. You know, the town is, quote, not vitalized and needing to be revitalized. At the same time, we have a moratorium that's sapping the town of any opportunity to do it under the current code. So it seems like on the one hand, we're talking about revitalization. On the other hand, we're doing everything we can to make sure that the town can't be revitalized without the passage of the form-based code, which puts undue pressure on this passage of the form-based code.
So right before I took public comments, I made the comment that the tail was not going to wag the dog on this. So what I meant by that is that the time limits set forth in the moratorium are not going to dictate the town's decisions with regard to the form-based code. So if I wasn't clear, I just wanted to clarify.
No, I understood you. I just wonder, and I'm not an expert in real estate, but there may come a point at which the landlords themselves may say, you know, we wish to sue the town. You're interfering with our ability to do business. I don't know. But what I'm saying is the longer we're doing this, the more we're just tying everyone up to do what they want to do. Or, you know, perhaps there are things on the boards right now that would build structures under the current coding that would not be a problem to anyone in the town, but they can't be done because we're doing this form-based code. So I
think we just lost you.
Oops, sorry.
I wish Suzanne was still here. Sabrina, if I could ask you, prior to your recollection, either prior to and during the pendency of this moratorium, how many building owners have come to you, that few or far between, a lot of little, who have said, I want to build on the current code to north of 3,000 square feet and are looking to buy up properties, or the current owner saying, hey, when are you going to lift this moratorium because I have a property, I want to expand it out. So I'm just curious, realistically, instead of just hypothetical, have you been getting a lot of these inquiries over the past 2 years and even before to build out much bigger spaces than the current footprints?
No, not at all. Little to none. There's definitely been one that has wanted to move. But other than that, there have not been a lot of pressure, a lot of people contacting the building department to do work in the hamlet that is restricted by the moratorium. There are allowances under the moratorium for smaller buildings for minor improvements. That is why you see certain improvements being made to buildings, but the process has not, to my knowledge, working in the building department, affected very many people. We haven't had a lot of inquiries to work around the moratorium.
Thank you.
Pam, if the next person with their hand raised, I believe, is Warren Gottlieb, if we can bring him into the conversation again.
Yep.
Hi again, everybody. I actually just wanted to, can everybody hear me? Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Jeremy, thank you for the thumbs up, Jeremy. I had assumed, and maybe incorrectly, that one of the reasons why the town board had been pushing this forward during COVID was because of pressures relating to the moratorium, which has been in place, I think, since November of 2018. If that's not the case, and Ivy, I'll take you at your word that you are not going to be dictated to by the county as to how long that moratorium stays in place for, and I got to tell you guys, why are we not waiting until a comfortable period after the COVID crisis is either ended or looks like it's going to be in the rearview mirror to engage in the exercise of this type of overhaul of the downtown zoning? Because otherwise, what's the time pressure? To me, time actually may be our friend, because we may be able to, we'll have the advantage of seeing what shakes out at the end of this. If we're not worried about the pressure point of a moratorium, why does this have to be done right now? Sabrina's already telling me that nobody's even coming to her, right? This is the question I pose to you.
I would note, Ivy, that the town cannot impose a moratorium and just allow nothing to occur. That would be impermissible, just have a moratorium and not do anything. The law, in fact, requires that you take, as detailed in the local law, steps to implement and do the underlying zoning that you're studying and examining. Purpose of a moratorium is to preserve the status quo while you examine if changes should be made. So you would have to continue with the review, as you've been doing and have proposed to do.
Thanks, Nick. And thank you, Warren, for your comments. The next person with their hand raised, Pam, is Sid Folkson.
Great, I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. I would like to have a better understanding of what the potential harms are of ending the moratorium. When it was first enacted, we all heard the boogeyman story of the Dollar Tree coming to town. And now, after having fully examined what the form-based code calls for, it doesn't say in the form-based code that the dollar store or Dollar Tree can't come to town. So I'm just a little confused as to why we continue to have the moratorium at all. And if you could just explain that, that would be helpful. And what the true dangers are.
And maybe Sabrina, you can jump in here as well. The purpose of the moratorium is to preserve the status quo, to make sure that what you're proposing is not undercut by a project being developed that is inconsistent with the form-based zoning code. Part of the form-based zoning code is to implement a vision towards, for example, one aspect, the architectural elements. So if you have a building that goes up that is completely at odds to that, and you've allowed that to occur while you're examining what architectural elements do you want in your downtown area, that's a little self-defeating. So that's the purpose. New York State law recognizes municipalities have this control over properties while to examine how you want what's your vision for the municipality. And that's just one example, whether it's the height of the building, the density, the parking. You know that there's some future with respect to how you envision downtown being redeveloped. You don't want to have that impacted by something being built now that would be inconsistent with that proposed use.
Thanks, Nick.
Yep.
Pam, I'm a little confused. We've already taken comments from Warren and Sid. I don't know if we didn't put their hand down.
People are getting cut off before their time is done, and they want to, I think, ask follow-up questions, and they're getting cut off.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's take the new hand that's raised, and then we'll come back to people who want to dialogue.
Fine.
The next person with their hand raised is Doris Strauss.
Hi, I've just been listening, and I just had a follow-up question to what Mr. Ward Willis just said about if you lift the moratorium and then someone coming in wanting to do a development that may be at odds with the form-based code vision, and that might not be so great, but isn't that why we have a current planning board in place to evaluate whatever new structures might want to come up, that there's some sort of control over that, and nothing too awful will happen because we do have procedures in place. So if you could just comment a little on that.
Sure, I know, I understand the comment. The planning board under the current zoning wouldn't have the ability to fully control to the same detail that the form-based code has. The form-based code would be particular with respect to the type of construction material used, the type of elements around the windows, the treatments, the diverse architecture. Sabrina can speak to that more than I can. I'm just not as familiar with it, but that's the general nature of the form-based code. The planning board wouldn't have the ability to restrict it because you don't have those specifications in your code.
In addition, I'd like to add that depending on the type of development or structure, the planning board may not have jurisdiction within some of the, depending on the project. So it's not a guarantee that the planning board would see the project. But the town council is correct in that the existing code does not have architectural standards that are proposed in the form-based code to help guide that type, what the building looks like.
So
Sabrina, also
can I
setbacks
just
are
follow
part
up
of
on that one point for example, for 91 Bedford Road that just went up. I'm just curious, who decided what the exterior would look like? Was it just the architect and the developer, or I'm just curious as to how it worked? Did the planning board come in?
The 91 Bedford was considered a change of use, so it went before the planning board. The applicant proposed architecture. The planning board weighed in a general sense, but the architectural review board actually approved of the architecture through the building permit process.
Also, Sabrina, the setbacks are different now as it will be in the future to require or mandate certain distances to.
Correct. The form-based code actually requires or puts in place more regard for the street, for making sure that there's adequate pedestrian area in front of buildings. It's more specific where the building should be placed on the lot and how that building relates to its neighboring buildings. That's different than what is in the code today.
More than just aesthetics, although we just discussed it.
Yes.
Correct. Absolutely. It's we haven't seen a building tear down in the hamlet in decades. What we have seen is renovation of interiors of buildings, conversion of commercial space on second floors to residential uses. That's what right now the code reads that the planning board would review a change of use. So right now we don't allow residential uses on the first floor. Oftentimes there's office uses on the second floor. Due to the market conditions, property owners have come in for a change of use before the planning board because they are introducing residential apartments on second floors.
Sabrina, I'm sorry. One last thing I want to mention or ask. we have had the ability, or in the current zoning, to build out another 300 some odd units in possibility, but that hasn't happened over time. So the
Correct.
moratorium has not stopped that from happening. It's basically the current zoning and the profitability has prevented that from happening.
Yes.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Well, and it's not just the profitability. I mean, a lot of the cost goes into renovating the existing building stock to meet today's needs. And I think that that's important. We have not had a new structure. 91 Bedford Road is the first new structure in the Hamlet area in many, many years.
And I was referring to profitability in terms of a current owner wanting to build up.
Correct.
Do.
Correct.
They need to be incentivized to do so.
Okay, thanks. I think we'll take new hands raised first. We'll take Ben Herman, please.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I'm just a little confused at this point what purpose the moratorium is serving. If the planning board has some review authority and the architectural review board has some authority, I appreciate that the form-based code would change some things. But again, to the point that if there aren't applications currently before the town, why does the moratorium need to continue? That's it.
I certainly will speak to it. So in my view, the moratorium needs to continue because we're already throughout this process of how it's going to change. And if I understand it correctly, Nick, if a building owner, whether it's a developer or current owner, they proceed at their own peril, if you will. So if they make certain build out now and it's not completed or not done by the time we institute our form-based code, how does that impact their ability, or pardon me, what does it mean to them in terms of being compliant with the setbacks, being compliant with the architecture? And for that matter too, the architectural review board is not mandatory all the time, is my understanding. They have discretionary and they encourage you to follow them, but it's not mandatory all the time. So number one, in terms of the impact on failing to comply with the ongoing zoning change that is going to potentially be implemented, how that impacts the development or change now. And then number two, some of what is said by the planning board, or pardon me, the architectural review board, and maybe even the planning board is not necessarily mandatory.
Well, yeah, I mean, a couple points there. One is that with the moratorium in place, one could apply, make an application, have it reviewed by the board, but they could not get approvals. Without a moratorium, one would go through the review project, maybe get a building permit, maybe build out, but they would not be protected when you adopt the new code, and they would then have to comply with it. There are some exceptions that could be made, but typically the way zoning works is that the zoning law that is in existence at the time the building permit is issued and until the time that you have what are called vested rights, substantial investment, more than just preparing the site, the new law would apply and then would void those applications and those approvals. So if someone started a process now, went through and didn't get an approval until 9 months from now, and on that, I won't say 9 months, until X months from now, and on that X month, the new form-based code gets adopted, they'd have to start over again. So it would really be a bit of a waste also for someone to go through that process. It would be, if you didn't have a moratorium, it would be a race for them to get substantial completion before the form-based code were adopted. And then to the other comment about the role, and Sabrina mentioned this a little bit earlier as well, that not all projects go to the planning board, not all projects get reviewed by the ARB, and Sabrina, I think you can talk to that a bit more in depth than I can, but not all of them would be subject to it. But again, you don't have the same robust requirements with respect to the character of the community in the existing zoning that you would have in a form-based code.
Okay, we'll take Warren Gottlieb back into the call. Welcome back.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. I actually just was going to ask Nick a follow-up question. When I asked why we couldn't, if the pressure point for pushing forward with the form-based code now had to do with the moratorium and suggested lifting it so we could lift that time pressure. the response to that, and I don't want to mischaracterize it, but the response to me came back as, well, you can't have a moratorium in place if you don't have a process that you are using as the predicate for the moratorium. And I guess that kind of goes, Nick, am I stating that correctly? If I'm not, please correct me.
No, my point was, if you're having a moratorium, you need to be doing something towards examining the underlying basis for the moratorium. In this case, the underlying basis of a moratorium is to re-examine the zoning in the hamlet area. You can't just not look at it and wait for a year or 2 years. You have to examine the zoning and make steps towards implementing changes, or not implementing changes, but completing your study.
Right. And that's that is a pressure point. So I think one of the things that keeps coming up in these meetings is that, people want progress and they understand the importance of revitalizing downtown and different ways to do it and so forth. But, it's the timing of it and wanting to have the benefit of knowing what's going to be on the other side of this crisis that we're living through. And to me, that's part of the process. And part of the process may be simply just waiting to see what's on the other side so that we don't make fundamental mistakes about assumptions about what a new zoning code would need to have in it or not have in it based upon how we come through this crisis. So I guess what I'm saying is that if in any way having the moratorium is contributing to a timetable that would deprive us the benefit of knowing what would be really putting us in the best position to have some insights as to what we would want going forward coming out of this crisis, then I think we should really think long and hard about that. And to the extent that a moratorium is in place, and Sabrina's already saying that there are no current applications. Is that correct? Is that because there's a moratorium in place, or is that because there's no interest? I think she dropped off. That's
I don't know that she would have any way of knowing why people aren't coming to her.
Okay, but right now there are no applications in front of the planning board that would be that
not in front of the planning board, in front of the development department.
Okay, the development department. Nobody has presented a plan, so why do we even have a moratorium? Do we even expect that that's going to happen? Well, I just don't understand why we have this. It seems to me.
So I feel like we've tried to answer this question a couple of times already with regard to why do we have a moratorium. And I think just simply put, the reason for the moratorium is because the town is considering some pretty significant and impactful zoning changes and having a form-based code. And we want to make sure that anything that gets developed as we are looking at these significant changes, that there is nothing that is counter to that which we are trying to enact. And as I started off by saying, the moratorium is not putting any artificial sort of deadline against this process.
If that's the case,
I'm sorry, can I finish? We are trying as hard as we can to work through all of these comments and to be thoughtful and deliberative and to have a form-based code that comes out of this process that is something that this community feels strongly and is behind. And we are continuing to work on that process. And this is not the tail wagging the dog.
Right. And that's why I'm just saying, what is the downside of waiting until we have this crisis behind us to having the form-based code considered in earnest? Why does it have to be done now? Okay, I guess nobody has an answer to that.
So I'm sorry, I was looking at my mute button. Why does it happen now? First of all, this is certainly a subjective question. Why does it have to happen now?
No, I'm just curious.
Okay, right. I understand that. I think it's a subjective question. I think the process is one that needs to move forward. It's been going on for a couple of years. I don't think I'm choosing my words carefully so don't misconstrue what I'm going to say. You don't plan for the pandemic itself, meaning you're planning for the future. And we know, and we can recognize absolutely that, for example, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of commuting. That's absolutely fair. So there are a lot of unknowns, but I think that built into the form-based code, for example, you have one hand people saying, well, we don't know how many people are going to be commuting anymore. So I'm making up a number here, Warren. I'm totally making up a number. Right. Let's say 20% of people don't commute anymore and they stay local. So then So then maybe the idea now is the time to look at potential ways in the future, setting us up for the future to look at parts of public property, the parking lot, to say, well, maybe it could be better use if it's in excess of 30% underused. Why do we need to have all that blacktop if it's not being used? What can it be? And right now it's industrial. So let's put the plans in motion to say, this is what we want to see going forward at some point. And whether or not, it goes on track A, B, or C, the form-based codes gives us the ability to still have something that works for the community. And keeping in mind, again, we want to shrink it. It's not going to be that 1,000 unit number we keep on hearing. To what extent it's less, I don't know. But it sets us up now for the future, because you can't say if commuting stops and now it changes, well, then why would we be sitting on a parking lot that's zoned industrial? Let's give us the opportunity to at least listen to people, say, well, these are options, these are things that can be done. Instead of along the way, taking each piece of town, each piece of the hamlet, saying, now let's do this whole process and start over again. Now let's do this whole process and start over again, and have a 2-year plus cycle for every piece of the town. And not to go too much off, but as I think Ben was saying it before, and I think it's a reasonable thing that we've discussed. Is it possible to do pieces of this at a time, meaning that it only starts in this section and that section and this section? So I do think it should go forward. I do think it's reasonable to go forward and set us up for the future, whether or not it happens in a week or in 5 years.
Okay, I agree that piecemeal actually probably. I actually thought Ben's plan was a great suggestion. And I really think that's actually something that should be looked at in the DGEIS. That's one of my disappointments with the document, is that it has a very I know they can't look at everything under the sun, but the goals of getting affordable housing and socioeconomic diversity could be achieved very quickly without doing the major surgery that we're talking about here. Maybe that's where we should start.
If I may, the purpose of this public hearing is with regard to the extension of the moratorium. If we can try to stick to that as a topic,
Okay.
I think that would be good.
All right. Thank you very much, Ivy. Have a wonderful evening.
The next person with their hand raised is Scott and Natalia Levine.
Great. Super quickly, my question is, maybe this is Sabrina or Nick that knows best. Maybe it's somebody else, I don't know. Are there examples from across New York State of other towns, other municipalities that have moratoria, where there's not development pressure? Where there's not a groundswell of applications coming in?
Well, every municipality, not every municipality, every moratorium has a different reason for it. I cannot off the top of my head answer that specific question. I can tell you that I am aware in the past of moratoriums being adopted for a variety of reasons, where there has been no application, or where there's been a flood of application, or where there's been the potential for application. It's why the moratorium exists, so that governments can preserve the status quo for whatever reason. So I can't give you a specific answer, Scott.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so that is all of the folks that we had with their hands raised. So can we, Jill, what is our intention with this evening? We were going to hold this open for written comment.
We were going to close the public hearing tonight, holding it open for public comment until noon on Friday, and then put it back on the agenda for the 15th for the board's consideration.
Okay. Can we get a motion?
We so move that as to what was indicated by Jill Shapiro, Town Administrator. Is that sufficient, Nick?
Closing the public hearing tonight, holding it open to public comments until this Friday at noon, and then consider it on the 15th.
You've been deputized. So moved.
Did we get a second? Sorry.
I seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that concludes our public hearings for this evening. The next thing we will go into is our resolutions, which I still need to find.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Good night, Sabrina.
I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $127,809.66 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detail voucher detail report, each prepared on December 7th, 2020. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, December 9th, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to adopt the December 1st, 2020 work session minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I move to adopt the following monthly reports for November 2020. Town clerk, court clerk, development department, and receiver of taxes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move to adopt the following resolution. Resolve, the Newcastle Town Board hereby adopts a preliminary budget as the final budget for fiscal year 2021, and be it further resolved that the 2021 final budget for the general and highway fund set forth a total tax levy of $16,732,851, and be it further resolved that the 2021 final budget for the solid waste district renews the annual dwelling unit charge of $440 per residential unit. And be it further resolved that with regard to condominium complexes with adequate refuse storage capacity as determined by the Commissioner of Public Works, the 2021 final budget for the solid waste district renews the annual dwelling unit of $440 per condo residential unit for those condominiums which will remain or change to once a week collection. And be it further resolved that with regard to condominium complexes with limited refuse storage capacities determined by the Commissioner of Public Works, the 2021 final budget for the solid waste district renews the annual dwelling unit charge of $264 per condominium residential unit for those condominiums which will remain at twice a week collection.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. And thanks once again to Controller Rob Deary and Town Administrator Jill Shapiro for a job well done on the 2021 budget.
Indeed.
You got it, Jeremy?
No, go ahead, take it.
All right. I move to authorize the Department of Public Works to utilize the services of the New York State OGS mini bid vehicle marketplace for the purchase of a 2021 Ford F-150 from Metro Ford Sales, Inc. For a total amount of $26,876.50 as allocated in the 2020 water operating budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the purchase of meters, couplings, and radio transmitters from Rio Supply, Inc. for a total cost of $24,673.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to authorize the Department of Public Works to purchase TAS rotary screw compressor from Ingersoll Rand Company for the mechanic shop for a total estimated price of $11,580.33, which includes installation, startup, and freight charges.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the hiring of Jeffrey Ganala Jr. from the position of laborer within the Department of Public Works Highway Unit at the annual salary of $48,055.31. Group 2, Step 1, effective December 28th, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You have them, Jeremy?
We had Justin Gould. I don't know if I'm at the.
Yeah.
Is it Justin Gould?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I wasn't right. All right, I move the hiring of Justin Gould from the position of laborer 042505 with the Department of Public Works Water Unit at the annual salary of $48,055.31 effective December 28th, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Last
There's
one, is that
actually the one more. I think I just sent it around to everybody. It's the resolution on the bottom. It's for Lauren Cascone.
Yep.
whoever has it can go ahead and read it. I got
I move to approve the transfer of Lauren Cascone from the position of secretary to the town administrator to the position of deputy town clerk at the annual salary of $75,000 effective September 28th, 2020. This resolution amends the September 22nd, 2020 adopted resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you all.
Night.